Hello to our New Zealand listeners. Powrup is coming to a city near you. If you're in Wellington, Christchurch or Auckland, we've specially designed a 4-week program to help you bust through those beliefs and habits that are holding you back. Come and join some of our very first leadership cohorts in June and July. We even have an email template to help you get professional development budget. So reach out at hello@powrup.com and we look forward to meeting you in person. Welcome to Powrup, the podcast that uncovers the unique challenges women leaders face today. Join your hosts Nat and Kristen as we dive into the tough topics and provide actionable insights you can apply right now. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Hello, thanks for listening. Today we're chatting about the ability to woo, that is, winning others over.
Not woohoo.
To woo or not to woo?
We always woo.
We always woo.
We were talking about this just before. Always woo. If in doubt, woo. This is another part of our mission to give you the tools and confidence to build a career on your terms. And wooing is a really key part of that, right? With the ability to influence and get people to get excited about what you want them to do and make it into a win-win rather than a dictatorial, is that what we call it?
Yes,
environment.
Nice one. Are you an influencer, Nat?
Absolutely. It's my dream to be an influencer. I spend way too much time on Instagram trying to be an influencer. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. You're an influencer.
I think influencing, it's really interesting. I was listening to a podcast in the weekend about negotiating and how we have this perception based on TV and movies we watch that negotiation's about winner take all, whereas actually really great negotiators find win-wins, and wooing is part of that, of really having everyone leave feeling really excited about what you've come to the agreement on.
Yes.
And the other thing I heard recently was that change our conversation from setting expectations to finding agreement. And I think all of these come under the banner of woo. How do you create an environment where everyone gets on board without feeling forced or without feeling they've lost anything or had to give up something?
And I feel like that is genuinely the leadership style of the future. We've talked a little bit about empathetic leadership, and this falls under that.
Yeah, and I feel like I've worked in places before where it was disagree and move on. And sometimes when you feel you're continuously doing that, you actually notice productivity dropping, right? Because when people don't buy into what they're doing, they're not going to put their heart and soul into it. So while it does feel woo-woo to woo, there is actually there are concrete, tangible benefits in getting people on board for productivity, for motivation, for retention of people in your organization.
Well, and even your own morale. I remember early in my career, I even remember vocalizing this, that I just needed a win, and I always felt as though I had good ideas and I had a really strong sense of some experiments to try as it related to growth early on in my career, and I just never seemed to get that past my manager at the time. And I remember just going, I just need a win, but that was because I didn't know any of this stuff that we're going to chat about today, which are the ways to woo, and really powerful ways to woo, which is tailoring your approach, getting emotional buy-in, and stories, not facts. So I think I probably just went about it the wrong way, and I needed to know this stuff.
Well, I don't know what your upbringing was like, but I think a lot of times when parents are busy, they tend to go, just do it because I told you to.
Yeah.
So I've noticed a lot of my friends now who have children are really modeling woo in a way of really getting their children to buy in. Whereas I think in past generations, it was very much do what you're told.
Yeah, we have to reason.
We have great parents, but it was a different style. So when you go into a workplace and your understanding of management and leadership is people need to listen to you, you actually are never taught that it's actually about getting buy-in, not using your managerial authority to force people to do stuff.
Yeah, and even just right from school days of school projects, I'm not sure if you remember those days where you end up doing a lot of the work, and part of that is down to an inability to influence those around you and to really get them buying in and delegating properly. And so this stuff is right back to the schoolyard of how to influence people, and some people are naturally gifted. Thankfully, this is a skill to be developed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think maybe people are naturally gifted, but I also feel like there is an element of we were talking about it the other day as well, if you're told you're good at something, you tend to be really, you focus on it. And I think when you start doing things like your example of early stage in your career and it's not working, you start to feel like you're not good at it. Whereas if you just put a couple of things in place and get a quick win, you start to get that positive spiral, and we can all look back and think we're natural influencers.
Yeah, great. Well, let's talk about tailoring your approach, the first of the 3 ways to woo. And this is all about, I mean, it's probably starts with curiosity and empathy, recognizing that every individual is different. They have unique needs, they have unique motivations, they have different success criteria. So whatever would make them successful in their roles is different from the next person, you know, depending on seniority or depending on their KPIs or their goals. But it's kind of recognizing that each person is unique. Therefore, you have to completely tailor your approach.
And I think I always notice this in relationship advice, that we always give relationship advice based on what we think a good relationship looks like, but a good relationship looks different to different people. So when you are wooing someone or influencing, really understanding what they're trying to get out of it before you actually tell them what your opinion is really, really useful. And so some examples that I was thinking about when thinking about this is, back in the day, I used to do a lot of consulting around websites, and quite often I'd go into an organization and they'd say, this is what we need. This is what success looks like to us. It's this big, beautiful website that's got this page and this image and showcases the CEO's profile or whatever it is. And I'd say, great, I'm going to do a really quick mock-up of that, and I'm going to do a really quick mock-up of what I think it should be. And then we'll put it down in front of a few people. And 10 times out of 10, they'd end up picking my option. But I didn't try and fight them at the conversation level. I showed them through showing them another path that might actually get better results. And I've always taken that through of, rather than trying to force people to understand or debate, because then you just get into this argument over my opinion versus your opinion, what are some of the tools? So have you got any that you use quite commonly?
Well, I remember actually trying to be wooed as a manager and being really, really busy in a growing startup at the time. And I would have liked to be wooed a little bit better. And what I mean by that is I had lovely, lovely people working for me, including this lad. And he was an incredible storyteller, which is great. And he had these big ideas and lots of energy, enthusiasm, really likable. However, read the signs, people are really busy, right? And you go, can I just talk to you? Or can I have a minute? So already you're going, oh, I've got to stop what I'm doing, stop the flow, whatever that looks like, and you're turning to the person, and then they start to talk and talk and talk and talk, and they're trying to set the scene, but they're not tailoring the approach to the actual situational context, which is, she is really busy. So I remember actually stopping after recognizing what was going on and why I'm like getting more irritated, and I said, can I just give you a little bit of feedback? And they said yes. And I said, start with the ask. Just start with the ask, and then I will let you know if I need more detail and what detail I need. And we just cut our communication and tailored it to a very busy startup. And it really helped him giving that direct feedback. But that's what worked for me at the time. So.
No, I really like that. And communication comes into play really obviously here too, of just ask. If you're going up to someone, you can say, hey, would you like to collaborate on this thing? Or would you just like my recommendation on this thing? And you can actually flat out ask. And I think a lot of us assume everyone wants a lot of context, and often if you are managing up and talking to someone who is in a more senior position, maybe who is in a very busy stretched role, stretched across multiple things, they actually don't want to know the detail. They just want to know what your ask is or what your recommendation is, and they will let you know. But it's always easy to just ask up front when you are trying to woo someone.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I also thought with tailoring your approach to different personality styles, and that even includes neurodiverse and people that take in information quite differently. So really appreciating with empathy, what are the different types of people either on my team, or am I, looking to influence up? What does that look like? And recognizing their communication style. And so I think developers is a really great example of this, is quite often they tend to be introverts and excellent logical problem solvers in my experience of what we've worked with. And so when you're in a situation where you're trying to influence your way of thinking and you want an answer right away, or you you want to gauge, you're just not going to get it. They actually need time to have, they need all the facts. So it's actually kind of tailoring your approach to what is it that they need to know. So you go straight to kind of logical facts and you paint the thing out, and then you actually have to just give them time to think about it and reflect and then come back to you. So right down to who is the person I'm looking to work with or collaborate with or get a decision from, and how do I have to tailor even the style?
I really like that. And I think it goes back to that communication thing again, and understanding what you are trying to woo at any particular time. Because in my experience, engineers are the first to spot when they're involved in a conversation that's not going anywhere or that they don't need to be involved in. And that actually impacts the rest of your relationship as well. So if it is very much an update, do you need to have a big conversation about an update? Write it down and send it out. So that frees up time when you want to collaborate and really clearly articulate, this is a collaboration, this is a problem we're trying to solve, let's get together.
Yeah.
You by knowing the different types of asks, you can actually change your behavior in each one, and that builds the trust as well. The other one that I am terrible at, but I have learned through a lot of listening and learning about negotiating is the power of pausing when you are trying to woo someone, because often we unwoo ourselves. Now we're getting really complicated with the words, but we often, if you are trying to tell a story or influence and someone's sort of not responding quickly, we tend to start talking in circles and going, oh, but what about, oh, we could probably change this, or oh, we could do this. And by the end of it, you've probably confused them and talked yourself out of it. So the power of a well-timed pause in the middle of a woo.
Yeah, that's great. So that's tailoring and giving space, I suppose, isn't it? Again, for that reflection. Yeah, that's great.
And staying on message. Have your message pause.
Yeah. Okay, great. I love it. Well, should we move into the next tip?
Emotional buy-in. I think this is a really, really big one. And in my life experience, and something we found out with research recently, is that most of us make emotional decisions, and this could be purchase decisions, this could be work decisions, and then we spend a lot of time justifying the facts and figures behind why we made that decision, but we didn't actually make it based on those. So if you can get someone to emotionally buy into an idea, you're 99% of the way there.
This one is really key in relationship building, and this is about having strong relationships and actually ensuring that you've got some sort of relationship before moving into whatever that ask might be, and that, you know, what can we do for each other and how can we work together as well, because going in cold and not having that relationship built up is very tricky to influence others, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the second big part of this is you need to be emotionally bought in. If you think something's a really great idea, being able to articulate why it's a great idea, what problem it will solve, or what benefit it will bring, and really paint a story or a vision of why it's so exciting. If you can do that and connect with people, they get excited about the same thing. Yeah. And then you, again, 90% of the way there, you've got them, even if they're not quite clear on how or what's required of them. The ideal is people put their hands up to help rather than you asking for help, right?
Yeah, and I don't think this is I don't think this is charisma. I think this is actually being authentically you. And if people can see your passion for an idea, they can see your enthusiasm, that is contagious. And I've experienced this. I've kind of put this is one of your leadership superpowers, Nat, is that you get really in behind an idea and your energy shows through, and that genuinely is contagious. And the other tool you use as part of emotional buy-in is humor. You've got quite a quick brain, and I've watched you make senior executives, really senior people laugh. Like, you're able to disarm them, and you use wit and humor. And I think that's actually part of people going, oh, I like Nat. Oh, I'm going to listen. Oh, and you break down barriers right away by going, that person's title doesn't matter. You just go straight for the human to human connection on humor.
I remember very, very long time ago being told people are people, and we tend to at work put in these really artificial business barriers almost of suddenly we talk in corporate speak, or we feel we need to speak very formally to someone who's in a more senior position, and that person's wrangling their kids at home and has had a fight with their partner that morning. And connecting as a human is actually, now you've told everyone my trick, but that you potentially are the first person to treat them like a human at work and empathize that they are another person who's dealing with stuff, and that you can actually just have a good time. I think and to follow up on the empathy thing, I think there's also that recognition, and we were talking about this last week, of when someone maybe a bit short, or, and I mean not like in terms of height, but in terms of language, or feels a bit frazzled when you come up to them and start painting your story of why you should do something and they cut you off, they've got stuff on, and empathizing with that. So I suppose it goes back to sort of the tailor.
Yeah.
What examples have you used?
Well, I've got an example of what you used.
Oh.
And this is one thing I witnessed early on when we were looking to influence a stakeholder, and it was quite a senior person, and I was going up to the board to do this big presentation. We were working together, and you were like, we're going to get a money gun, and you started talking about a money gun, and you were like, Kristen's going to bring a money gun, and telling this very senior stakeholder who now recognizes I'm going up to his stakeholders to ask for something, and you're just like, what do you think? And you just doubled down on this concept, and he just giggled and turned red. But you did get emotional buy-in for the passion behind what we're doing and the humor of it all, and trying to make light of a situation. But I'll never forget that. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. And I have actually influenced the purchase of 2 money guns now. Neither of them was by us. I still want one. I still think a money gun is a very key part of any sales pitch. I think the other one that I think we both use quite a lot is assuming the other person is very smart. And often people use the language of make them feel smart. I think that's kind of BS. I think actually other people are smart. And rather than fake it and make them feel smart, recognize their intelligence. So often we find this a lot as well. People aren't super well educated on one small thing, because we have specialists for a reason, and a lot of leaders are generalists. And so they have to be generalists. And so if you assume someone's incredibly intelligent, however, they may not have all the facts on this particular thing, you actually change how you communicate something. You use plain English, you don't assume jargon or that they'll know X, Y, and Z, and you tell the story or paint the picture really clearly at the level that they need, while not patronizing, because I think no one likes to be patronized, and no one likes to ask, in quotation marks, dumb questions. And I've heard this recently a few times where people have said, I felt like I was the only person in the room who didn't understand. And I was like, yeah, you were, because their job was actually to fill you in as experts, and they didn't do a good enough job if you were left feeling like you didn't understand and you couldn't ask questions.
Yeah. My biggest tip for myself personally for emotional buy-in is to create a connection with that stakeholder. And we were at a chat the other day, and we were talking about building rapport with people and building your networks and what that looks like. And I think, to your point, they are just humans going around life. And I think the sooner that you can find an emotional connection with someone, and that could be while you're in the kitchen together, it could be while you're in the hallway, it could be when you're sitting down at that table. I think barriers are up. People generally are skeptical, they're busy. If you can break down the barrier and have one single connection with that human, you will be more likely to succeed with emotional buy-in. And that could be a connection if you see a photo of their children on their desks. You know, it could be asking about their weekend, and then you quickly can find out, oh, I do that thing, or I enjoyed to do that too. Oh, have you hiked this one, this trail? Or it could be that people have just finished watching a great series.
Succession.
Yeah, Succession, or whatever that might be, Formula One, and you have this conversation on, oh my goodness, I love that. I think whatever you can do before jumping straight to business, which is great, to create emotional buy-in that we are actually on the same level and we have shared interests, and you just have to be curious to find that out, ask a bunch of questions, listen, and you'll pick up cues based on what they've done the day before, the weekend, or photos, or it could be a cricket ball on a desk, and you go, oh, I saw that incredibly crazy thing over the weekend at Ashes, and then you just have this connection.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel like I've challenged myself in the past to not make my first question, so what do you do, and pick up another cue and run with that. So it could, if there's nothing around, sometimes it's like even what type of shoes they're wearing,
Yes,
or,
the
like, oh, where'd you
purse.
get those? Or
Yes.
something really cool part of their outfit, or, oh, where did you come from before this? What was happening? And just really challenge yourself to ask interesting questions. You find, again, you'll probably be the first person who hasn't just flat out asked what you do.
Yeah, I like that.
Or something a little bit different that makes you memorable. So, the third one
is stories, not facts. And this is all about storytelling. And we've just written an article, which will be in the reference, and it'll be in our newsletter. But this is all about how to storytell to get what you want, which is a very key part of winning others over and influencing. And that's because our brains, research has shown that our brains love stories. When we are told a story, we remember it, so it's more memorable. Secondly, we genuinely feel as though we're there. So if you can paint a picture for someone, it's like we're there if we're told a story.
I love it. And it follows on from last week's podcast where we talked about how you might memorize a talk where you walked around your lounge.
Yeah.
You basically told yourself a story of
Yes.
walking through your lounge, and it immediately makes you able
Memorable.
to memorize each part. So this is your superpower, one of your superpowers.
Yeah.
So what's an example of where this superpower has come in really handy?
Well, there's probably two, and one I think of all those times I failed in my early career because I didn't recognize the power of storytelling and actually setting up the context. And so setting up almost like you have to paint a picture of the vision of the future of how great this could be. What is the best case scenario of this idea or this thing, and paint the picture of this is the way the world is moving, or these are some trends that we should be watching, and really pushing into the future and having people buy into momentum of something, and that we could actually be a key player in that momentum.
Painting a picture. Also, I love your growth mindset here, and I think this circles back to the start where you felt early on that you weren't a great storyteller, and now it's a superpower. I love that this is such a leadership thing of recognizing the traits you might want to build and building them, even if they weren't something that you felt was a strength early on. I think that's really cool. And an example for both of us, I suppose, is when we started Hatch. Hatch is an investing platform, and it's probably a little bit harder to imagine now, but at that point, investing platforms were all numbers and graphs and fast-paced ticker tape and all sorts of really boring, confusing, scary stuff. And we painted a vision of a future that I know we both truly believed in, of a time where everyone has enough financial control over their lives that they own their decisions. They can quit the job they don't like. They can leave the bad relationship. They can take a year off work to spend with their kids. And when I tell you that, even when I say that now, I imagine everyone's imagining that, what that must feel like and what it must look like to live in a world where that could be the case.
Yeah.
So we never sold an investing platform. We never talked about an investing platform when we were talking to new customers. We talked about what the story of their life might look like as a result of investing. And investing was just a tool to get them to this place that we could all imagine, and finding and painting that story so everyone sees that same picture was how we kept everyone motivated at work, because they turned up every day, and even if their job was to do something really boring and monotonous and hard that day, they were doing it because they believed in that story. And I think that is the power of storytelling.
Yeah, and we did it with Powrup as well when we were pitching it on stage, is we had to, and when we chat with people, we go straight to, these are the women that we're chatting with. And for example, one named Jane. Jane has put her hand up at work and really bravely stepped into an uncomfortable position, which is great. She's stretching, she's growing, but she looks around all of a sudden and goes, what am I doing? And I feel like I'm failing. I'm doubling down on all the things that got me here, but they're not quite the right skills to get me to the next step. And so people like Jane tend to burn out. So we're painting the picture of Powrup coming in and wrapping a level of support that Jane, looks like she's succeeding on the outside, but internally is feeling really flustered and that things aren't going great. So we paint this picture of where we come into play and really going, because most people go, oh, I felt like that before, and investors go, oh, that's interesting. Or it could be Sarah, who wants that promotion and just needs that, you paint the picture of, with Powrup, we're really shortcutting some of these hard learnings and really paving the way for Sarah to ultimately achieve her goals this year. And so it comes down to humans and we're having an impact on people's lives and how we tell those stories.
I love it. And I think on a smaller level, this is a tactic I've used really recently as well. And something that I've heard from a lot of power suitors is getting buy-in for even their job. And I know it sounds odd, but people often get hired to do a role. And this is often the case with design, user experience, product stuff. That's the world I come from. Marketing's another big one, where you often feel like you have to justify, or this is what we hear, justify almost your existence or the value you bring to the table. And so an example the other day is we are huge fans of what we call discovery, researching and just understanding what the problem is and talking to a whole bunch of people about the things that are on their minds. So I was met with quite a few challenges to that from a company that we're working with, and quite rightly they were like, why does this work better than just doing a survey? Why would we send people into a house for an hour? It feels like a huge investment. What's the extra value? And so I just told a few stories of a company we were working with who was thinking about launching this big platform, and they were going to design it, build it. They were going to throw millions of dollars at it. And we went and spoke to a bunch of people in their houses, and I told the story of how we found the exact opposite. And so just rather than going, it doesn't work for X, Y, and Z, I actually just told the story of this other business and they got it.
Yeah.
And so I think all of us, yes, you can paint out a vision for your company, but at a small micro level, really understanding and having a couple of anecdotes. And I've heard that as well when you're talking about your elevator pitch, is having 3 of your skills, thinking of your top 3 superpowers, and having one story that supports why that's your superpower that you have in your back pocket to pull out when you're explaining it. That's another way you can use storytelling, rather than just saying, like we have here, I'm great at getting emotional buy-in, saying once I went in and did this thing. It's a really powerful way for people to go, I get not just that you have that, but how that might add value to my life.
Well, and every single person has their own unique story. And I remember someone who applied to work with us who was an Olympian. And that story that you tell in an interview, for example, has so many connotations. It's got dedication, goal setting. And so again, it is this lived experience that someone goes, this has shaped who I am. And it doesn't have to be an Olympian, but it is really powerful to think back on your unique lived experiences and be really open and honest about your values and what shaped you, and bring that to the table, because that often paints a really compelling picture of who you are and why you care. And to your point of kind of making it really tangible, you can tell stories and should tell stories at every meeting that you're holding. So you should set the context of why we're in this room, what does success look like, where, big picture, where are we going, but then bringing it right back to why you personally care, like reminding people why you're waking up to do this today. And it'll just immediately change the mood in the room. That will be memorable. People will go, oh, well, I care too. They'll be reminded of why they care and why they're there. So really simple tactics to use.
And the last example I have was someone back at Hatch as well. Everyone used to call our customers on their anniversary, and she had this wonderful story of calling someone, and that person picked up the phone and immediately started singing happy birthday to themselves. So for when she was influencing a bunch of people who were quite nervous to call someone, a stranger, and talk about their investing experience, by telling that story as humor, it broke the ice and it created an emotional connection of, oh, that might happen to me. This isn't scary. This isn't. And so it really just takes, this tool is a great way of taking things out of the unknown and making them real and tangible.
Yeah. And so people, don't be shy about your unique lived experiences and your kind of opinions and stories that you have in the why, because it often is an aha moment for people to go, oh, okay, you are relatable as a leader, like I know a little bit more about you, and therefore respect kind of comes through that, and a desire to want to collaborate with you, but then they feel comfortable sharing their stories as well, and I think that's a really healthy place to work. Yeah, no, it's great, and it's very, very powerful, and those people, they stick in your mind. I think if we weren't going to do an action, but if you actually are listening, think about someone who's really stuck with you and why they stuck with you. Did they have a great story, and how could you articulate one about your why, and it could be why you want to do this piece of work, or what your goal in life is, or what value you add. Just think about
the most powerful stories you've heard and how you could take some of that and apply it to your own life.
Yes, and customer stories are so powerful. If you're going up and influencing at a senior levels, any company, which every company nowadays are like, we're so customer centric. If you start with a customer story, because they'll be far removed from that by now, which they shouldn't be, but they will be if you start with that. So
unless they're Airbnb. Did the CEO take a year and lived in Airbnbs for a year to rediscover what the experience was like?
Amazing. And they are one of the most powerful storytelling corporates in the world.
I mean, and that was a great story in itself.
Yeah.
Great PR.
Yeah, amazing. Cool. Well, that's great. Is there anything you want to, one of these woo factors that you want to work on yourself, Nat?
I think that tailoring of approach for me is something I've been thinking a lot about when it comes to meeting, when it comes to workload. How do I get really clear on what my goal is in any conversation, what type of conversation I want to have, and what are the specific tools I'm going to bust out in that conversation, rather than sort of just walking in and applying the same tools to every job.
So it's a little bit more strategic, and that's very fitting, and I'll add my vote to that one as well, because as we are influencing people to join us on this journey of Powrsuit, and we're going into organizations to sponsor memberships of their women to join us, that is about tailoring our approach to what their unique needs are, in their organizations.
And their barriers. I think that's the other big one is people come to every conversation with their own reservations, which we often forget. We think people come with a blank slate. How do we understand what those are and tailor to that? So I think that's big for us.
I love it. Well, hopefully you got a lot out of today. As I said, there'll be some more resources in this podcast. Please give us 5 stars and give us a follow. We love to see this podcast growing because it is. And you can check out more on our website.
Powrsuit.com, POWR, Powrsuit without the E. We've got a lot. You sign up to our newsletter there. It's free to sign up. You get 1 email a week. Block out 30 minutes in your calendar. We've got so many stories from our community of how that 1/2 hour a week has actually changed how they lead and giving them confidence and helping them say yes to the right opportunities. So join us if you haven't already.
And we'll catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.